Welcome to the Workbench. I'm Doug. Today I'm going to talk to you about some maintenance that may be necessary on all of your Longarm machines and your carriages. Over time when using it, typically you have the quilts laying over the top. Sometimes some stray threads from the bottom side of that quilt, over time lint and fuzz, can get into your carriage and your carriage wheels. These are very nice machines and they move very freely. But if any of the wheels in the carriage or the machine get thread wrapped around them or become dry, then it makes it harder to move. Yes, left and right. But it also may put a strain on the motors for your Pro Stitcher. So it's beneficial every few months, depending on how much you use it, that you go through a little cleaning process of this. And that's what I'm wanting to show you today. And as you can see, I've already removed all the poles to get those out of my way, okay? You also want to make sure that you unplug the machine from its power source. So the next step, we want to disconnect the cables going from the machine, going down into the carriage. Now, of course, you have your plugs already disconnected from the wall, but if you notice here on the plug on the machine, there are two locking tabs that have to be pushed and squeeze together in order to remove. Okay, this is unique to the machine. You have another cable going to your carriage on the other plug. This one doesn't have that red lock. After you disconnect the cords, then we have the patch cable that's going from your carriage into your machine, sending all the communication. Okay, so here we have to remove the cable from the back side. So you should always have these screws tight to lock that in place. So just loosen. Once you get them disengaged, then gently just pull it out. And I like to just kind of lay it over the top of the handle. Once you have everything disconnected, the next step is going to be cleaning the wheels that are attached to the machine itself. On the side of your machine, you have an encoder that rolls front to back, and this sends the information to your machine on how fast you're moving it for your regulation sewing, or sending the information to your Pro Stitcher. You always want to make sure that when you're moving the carriage front to back, that this roller is making contact with the tracking. There's a little rubber tire on here. And sometimes we may see if you take the machine off, put it back on, pull it out of the box, you take a risk of knocking this rubber tire off. Okay, and then at that point, you're not going to get good communication. So always make sure that this wheel is intact. Okay, and then the wheels that are attached to the machine itself. I'm sure that if you're using the machine heavily, that you're going to experience some thread that may lay in here from the bottom of your quilt. So I just happen to have this little pick that my dentist let me take home. Okay, so something like this, you could pick and remove any threads that you might see. Sometimes if you get one lodged, just by holding it while you move the machine could unravel it from the inside. Okay, and when it comes to the oiling, you want to use the oil bottle that was provided to you with your machine. It's got a very small dispersion tube, which will allow just 1 or 2 drops at a time. So when you're lubricating, right inside that bearing that you see spinning, put a couple drops of oil. And once you do, you want to move the machine front to back to work that lubrication in the bearing. It doesn't hurt to put 1 drop on the inside of the wheel. Okay, and then you're going to repeat and do the same thing for all 4 wheels that are mounted to the machine. Okay, once you have the wheels from the machine cleaned up, it's going to be helpful to have a little assistance to remove the machine off of your carriage. So whether or not it has Pro Stitcher or not, the procedure is going to be the same. Okay, so I'm going to have a little help here. Jim, thank you very much for your assistance today. So it's because of the weight of these machines, it's helpful just to lift straight up and then carry off to the side on a protective pad. And now that we have the machine taken away from the carriage, we'll be able to look and service the top portion of that carriage. How long has it been since you've seen this, huh? Okay, so you know, the bottom of your quilt, loose thread sometimes can get entangled. So we have here the Y gear. This is what on Pro Stitcher moves your carriage front to back. Okay, so if you see any threads within this area, again, you can come in with your little pick to take away and remove. Okay, now once you do that, now it's ready for your lubrication. And at that point, we want to put one drop on each side of this casting. And then you have a little bearing here going through this shaft that we'll want to lubricate. Okay, and just like we did with the wheels on the machine, we just want to rotate this gear to work that lubrication in. Okay, and then on the bottom side, you're going to see the same shaft as we saw on the top here with the C-clip. You want to go ahead and lubricate that as well. And then come into this side on each section of the gear and work that lubrication in. You never want to over oil too much. You know, you don't want a lot of oil getting into your electronic components. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And then we're going to move up to the X motor and the X gear. Okay, same thing. Use your little pick. Any type of thread that you see, remove. And then come through and lubricate on each side of the gears that you see here rotating. Okay, so put a drop here, drop on that shaft, one on the back side. Your tube fits right between the gear and the frame here. And then you have the other shaft, just one small drop. Again, just one small drop in each area. And once you get that lubricated, you can just use your finger to rotate the belt and the gear here to work that lubrication in. So that's not so hard, right? Now the reason I kind of want to do this on top is so that if we're picking anything and anything drops down to the bottom, we'll see it for our next step. And that's going to be taking the carriage, gently lifting up, laying on its side, and then reversing it. Okay, now anything that's come loose probably be on your stand, but it doesn't hurt, you know, if you needed to use an air can. Okay, aerosol cleaner, okay, will blow out any extreme lint and fuzz for you, yeah? Okay, but you just want to remember that, you know, when you're using canned air, you never want to lean it, or else you're going to get that Freon spray. Same if you shake it, right? So you always want to make sure that you just leave the nozzle to direct your airflow as you're blowing out with your compressed air. Okay, now on the bottom side, you may even see more trails of threads. The lubrication's already been done, so just make sure that you've retrieved any thread that may have dropped when we had it on the other side. But now we're going to expose more caster wheels. Okay, now if you look here where the bolt comes in, there's a track and there's a bearing that's staying stationary while the wheel is rotating. So that's where you're going to want to place your drop of oil on the carriage wheels. So you're just going to put one drop on each side on the top. Okay, and then work that in. Just give it a spin. That sucked right up, so I may want to add one more little drop. And I think on your machine, after you do that and give these a spin, you'll feel a big difference. Okay, so you just want to continue on to all 8 of the carriage wheels that lie right across your tracking. You know, it might always also be a good idea, you know, after you lubricate it, you clean everything, you rotate your bearings, that you just take a cleaning cloth of some kind to get rid of any excess oil. Excess oil can actually collect dust and lint. Okay, so make sure that everything's nice and clean on the carriage. And then we have the X encoder, similar to the one that we have mounted to the machine for your front and back motion. So this is also spring-loaded to put pressure against the track. Any threads or anything like that could eliminate that motion. So make sure that that's nice and clean, and make sure that the tire's in place, like we mentioned for the other encoder. And once we get the bottom of the carriage all serviced, of course we're going to have to put it back onto our frame. So just lay it off to the side and lift up and gently position the carriage wheels back onto your track. Okay, once you have them in place, it's not going to hurt to kind of move those bearings left and right to lubricate and to work that oil into those bearings. Okay, once the carriage is in place, at this point, all we have to do is position the machine back onto the carriage. And keep in mind, they're very heavy, so it's helpful to have help. And Jim, thank you very much for helping me with this today. Just be gentle with the wheels and guide them on the tracking. Thank you, sir. And then again, let's just move the carriage front to back to work the lubrication in to the carriage of the machine. And once it's mounted back onto your carriage, of course, we have to reconnect everything to make it work, right? So again, it could vary by model a little bit, but let's go ahead and take that patch cord, which plugs into your board on the back. And what this is doing is sending your communication from your encoders into the Pro Stitcher, if you have that. And it's so nice. I'm sure that everybody would like to have that. Okay, now once you get this into position, you want to use a screwdriver with a little bit wider blade so that you can secure this tight to your connection. Okay, and then you want to get your power cables that we removed. Okay, and like we mentioned, we have two different connector types on this machine. All of our newer Longarm machines have locks now to hold our plugs into the machine, making sure they don't come disconnected. So you always want to put this into the back of the machine and lock tight. Now you can see when I pull on it, it's not going to come away unless I were to compress the red buttons. Okay, and you want to kind of lay that to the back side. And then we have the power plug on this machine going into the carriage. Okay, and at that point, we've got everything reconnected. Then you'll want to take your power leads and plug them into your outlets in the wall. The Regalia and the Pro Stitcher has its own power cord. So it's best to plug them directly into the wall, or better yet, plug them into a surge protector. That will help to protect your machine. Okay, now you see I had plugged mine in, and right away before doing anything, you can see that I have lights blinking on the carriage of the Pro Stitcher. So even when the power is turned off for the machine, it's always getting current coming into here. So since this current is always coming to the carriage, you want to make sure that when the machine is not in use, that you unplug the connector going into your wall or going into your surge protector. And that'll take away any fault that could occur in your carriage. Okay, and then if you don't have Pro Stitcher, all you have to do is turn the power switch on and get back to work. But if you have the Regalia and Pro Stitcher, you have a power switch in the back to turn on. And then it should beep. If you hear that beep, you know everything's communicating. If you flip that switch and it doesn't activate on the Regalia, don't forget there's a power switch on the very front. It's kind of hard to reach the switch in the back, so baby lock put the switch here to make it easier for you to activate on and off. And once the machine is energized, all powered up, that's when you want to turn on your Pro Stitcher tablet if you have it. So Pro Stitcher Lite, always initialize the machine first, and then turn on your Pro Stitcher. Okay, now that you've given your machine some tender, loving care, you should be ready for some successful stitching. This should be carried out maybe every 3-4 months, depending on how much you use the machine. We have a lot of other videos available showing you the other general maintenance, including your tension, your bobbin case area, and some lubrication. Those all can be found following this QR code that will take you directly to the playlist for all of my Workbench videos for all Baby Lock models. So now that you know, get out and quilt.